A lot of systems will say you have an order from Mrs. Jones here, you need to go and pick her full order before it can be dispatched. So we needed a system that we were able to customize. We want a setup where we could go and pick Mrs. Jones' tabletop here. Someone else is going to go and pick her chairs, and in an hour's time, I'm going to go and pick the legs. But it doesn't matter, because when I get to the pack station, I can still print the consignment label for just that individual piece. Peoplebox gave us great flexibility for that, and it's been super useful.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy and leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify, and our topic is, we're talking to the Furniturebox co-founder Dan Beckles on marketplace growth strategies. So another topical episode this week. There's a lot of talk about marketplace commerce. It was growing quite rapidly over the last few years, but there's more interest I'm seeing as well in businesses that haven't historically really pushed into marketplaces, looking at how they extend and then open up to new sales channels. So really looking forward to having this conversation. So warm welcome to our guest, Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, very well, thanks, James. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking on. I'm really looking forward to it. I know through Rupert 5874, who's your big commerce partner. I've been hearing a lot of really, really positive things from him over the last few months about what's happened and your growth story. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about what's behind it. So before we get into the nitty gritty about the e-com strategy and that growth piece, let's start with the founder stories. I think it's really interesting. Like, where did you and Monty, your co-founder, get the idea of Furniturebox from? Because the furniture space has got quite a lot of competition, quite a lot of heritage businesses and large sheds as well. So where did the idea come from? I guess, how much has the concept evolved since you launched in 2015?
Yeah, so I'd known Monty for years and years and years. So we were best friends throughout school. Whilst we were at school, he was one of those young entrepreneurs selling things on eBay. So all sorts of bits and bobs throughout our school journey. We played in sports teams together. I was actually going to go off to university. So I had my place at Loughborough. I was going to go and study economics. And just before I did that, Monty turned around to me and he'd heard that there's a potential opportunity in furniture because it was quite big and bulky. And at the time in 2015, there wasn't a huge amount of competition on eBay and other marketplaces because the barriers to entry are pretty high. If you wanted to get into the furniture space, you had to buy a big container and then you'd have to sell this big bulky furniture throughout the UK where it could get damaged. So it wasn't the easiest industry to go into. And so we saw that there was actually quite a big opportunity for us to be one of the first people doing that on a large scale throughout marketplaces. So the idea very much at the start was a case of, let's find a supplier, get one container and then see what sells. At that point, we were going on trends and styles we'd seen elsewhere, getting inspiration from other people. And because we had that eBay store built up for years and years, we were already a top seller on eBay. So we started there. And I guess in terms of how it's evolved, marketplace has always been a huge thing for us, and they still are to this day. We sell on about 9 or 10 different marketplaces, so that strategy has never left us. But I think the way that the business is evolving now is we've got a bit more purpose to us. Back then, we were just buying and selling furniture in any way, shape or form, whereas now we're doing it with a bit more purpose and direction, I might say.
Interesting. Yeah, you said so about 9 marketplaces. Now, I find this really interesting because a lot of businesses, their first port of call when they launch on e-commerce is, right, let's get our own website and then maybe we'll use one marketplace. Like I've seen that a lot where eBay or an Amazon, rather than marketplace first and then I guess build out your own web presence. So what was the reason to go down that route and just go, right, we're going to focus on getting the marketplace strategy right first rather than try and expand a massive D2C piece of our own?
Plain and simple, pretty much capital. So we bootstrapped everything and we were 2 18-year-old boys, so we didn't have money behind us. And that meant that we couldn't afford to build a website, develop a website. And so because we had the experience on the likes of eBay, we knew how it worked, we could transfer that experience across lots of marketplaces. So we used the likes of an eBay and Amazon initially to grow our brand and leverage capital that we could then invest in a website. So the dream was always to have our own website. But I guess the thing that stopped us initially was we just couldn't afford it. And using the likes of an eBay and Amazon are brilliant because it sort of catapulted us. They pay for a lot of the marketing, the advertising, and we're merely just using their platform. There are obviously fees involved, but it meant that we could be seen by thousands and thousands of people without having to pay the traditional marketing costs associated with a website.
And on the strategic side, I guess I'm going to split this into two bits. The second bit's going to be where you focus on how you get from like 1 or 2 up to 9 marketplaces. The first bit would be what you touched on it earlier, the big challenge of furniture. It's bulky. Lead times can be complicated to manage, and they should be shipping from various places around the world, and you've got supply chains to manage, which I imagine at age 18 is quite daunting to come in and go, right, how do you know this? Because if you don't get the proposition right and you can't fulfill and you start missing order delivery dates, then in marketplaces that can massively hamper your seller reputation. So how did you approach that to make sure you got that piece working? And how much of a learning curve was that?
Yeah, it was a huge learning curve. I think the thing that really helped us is that we did everything. So we started to understand, particularly with the marketplace and the channels, how we needed to behave with those. So you talk about furniture items being big and bulky. They absolutely are. And at the start, our packaging probably wasn't that great. Because our packaging wasn't that great, we would see the complaints firsthand. And because we saw the complaints firsthand and supported the customers, it meant that we cared a lot more about our packaging. So we would then go to our suppliers and make sure the packaging was even better, because if it wasn't and we kept getting complaints, we didn't have the capital to then buy more furniture. But also on marketplaces, what's really important is your feedback. And this is where I think it's helped us to evolve over time, because we've always hugely cared about customers and serving customers in the best way possible. And that started really at that core premise that we wanted to do the best possible job we could. And that's kind of where we saw the gap there, because there were lots of sellers selling similar product, some cheaper than us. But we said, actually, how can we be better than all of them? And so merchandising is one part of it in terms of our imagery, our descriptions, but actually that service proposition to customers was huge for us. So it was a massive, massive learning curve, because we didn't know anything about furniture when we went into furniture, and we were still very fresh on business. So we did make a lot of mistakes, but we learned from those pretty quickly. But what was at the core of everything we did was that customer. And so it would be myself and Monty calling up a customer at 6 p.m. in the evening to apologise if something went wrong and making sure we rectified it. It would be us in the warehouse adding additional packaging and fragile tape to make sure that customer got the item. So any problems we dealt with ourselves, and I think it really helped us to appreciate the nuances in the industry and maybe how we could be better. So yeah, I think it definitely was the right move for us to do that, and that was for the first 3.5 years. We did absolutely everything, even from the unloading of containers and sourcing the products. So.
Do you know what? It's a really important point of differentiation, because a lot of big retailers, the leadership teams won't have that ground level experience of being involved in the nitty gritty, having to see what the issues are, having to fix them, phone up customers, apologise, handle issues, deal with irate customers, turn them into happy ones. Now, like fast forward to where you are now, as a leader, who I imagine you're probably not doing so many calls to customers to say what's going on with your order because you have teams. How does that help you in terms of like managing the business, managing teams, to have seen that firsthand?
I think it gives that perspective and appreciation for the jobs that everyone does. Because we've done every single job, we know how hard they can be and how stressful they can be. And I think, particularly in operational roles, a lot of business leaders don't understand that. Whereas we're still regularly, for Black Friday and our busy periods, we go into the warehouse and we do the full day with everyone. We appreciate how difficult that can be. And I think by going through that as well, we know what worked for our customers and what made people happy. And so we've got a brilliant management team around us, and they've transferred the way that we started the business as we've grown. So our service level's still superb. We still treat every single customer individually with their own needs, and we cater to that. So I think it's been hugely important for us as we grow to keep that culture, and everyone we brought in has managed to fit into that perfectly.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, and it's recruitment is challenging when you grow to get people who can buy into the culture, but the culture always comes from the top down when it's done properly. And I think that's really important because empathy towards other people's stresses and challenges is important. And you said earlier about lessons learned, because no matter not any of us working in e-com, whatever we've been managing and growing on, we make mistakes, we learn from it, and we sharpen up. And I think in marketplaces, a lot of times people's main focus is, right, have we got the right price? Have we got the right images and product data? And if we get the product data wrong, that's generally where the e-com lens focuses. What else have you seen? Like, what were the mistakes outside of just that product data piece? And what have you learned from it? And how does it help you sharpen up your marketplace strategy?
Yes, I think there's so many mistakes that we've made along the way. There's the obvious ones with the product. So sometimes we've had product that's come in that's been defective, and we didn't have our own QC teams at the time. So you would get an inspection report from a supplier, the product would come in, we didn't have the time to open it up and check it. And so before you know, you've sold 10 tables, someone, and there's a defect on every single one. You've then got 10 customers who are angry. You've got product that you have to quarantine, that you can't sell. And so we went through a few of those hurdles before we got it right. I think in terms of marketplaces more generally, it's a mistake maybe that we've made later on, that on reflection, we did it for the right reasons, but it's maybe not the best way of managing marketplaces. We have about 10 to 15,000 SKUs as variations, and we thought it would be a fantastic idea to load every single one of them onto every single platform. Now, the typical sort of 80-20 rule, we've got 20% of our products that are making up about 80% of our revenue. Rather than focusing on those, we almost spread ourselves a little bit too thin. And at the start, it was fantastic because you might have 20 products that you've got to manage. And so you can merchandise them, you can track them, you can make changes to them, you can put all of your time and attention into those products, and they're making all of your revenue. Now, fast forward to where we are sort of today, when you've got to do that on 10,000 products, you can't put the time in on all of them. And so we probably stretched ourselves quite thin, and we've actually found that a lot of marketplaces, we're pulling back our selection a little bit now to try and focus on those core ranges. So I'd say that's probably a mistake that we made, rather than going after just our best-selling products and doing those even better. We sort of spread ourselves quite thin by having everything on there.
Do you know, that resonates with me. Before I was a consultant, I was head of ecom. I launched a brand onto Amazon, and I made that classic mistake. It was like, let's get everything on, we maximise our sales, and actually just diluted it. And I, as a result, the quality of the listing wasn't as strong, and my marketing wasn't. And I learned the hard way as well. I was like, that really cocked up. Strip it back, focus on your top 20. And that's exactly, I went from 200 to 20 SKUs, and I was like, right, that feels manageable now. I can actually see some sales.
Exactly that. And I think it's the logic was there, and it's the reasoning in your own head. You say, the more products we have on there, the more we sell. But when you actually strip it back, and let's say you've got an ads budget of £100 a day, if you're spreading that over 10,000 products, you're not going to actually generate any sustained good ad revenue. So it's definitely something we're looking at more and more now to strip.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got the knock-on impact of stock is precarious sometimes. You can't guarantee every SKU is going to have constantly good, solid supply, and managing the ones that don't have that volatility to establish your seller rate is far more sensible, and then gradually add in. Yeah, exactly. So I saw, read an article recently about your US sales tripling last year, and you said that was driven a lot by Wayfair, and I'm really intrigued by this because I mistakenly assumed it was Amazon, and you said Wayfair. So I'd love to know, why is Wayfair so pivotal to you in the US? And coming back to that question about range, how do you approach the range bit for the US market?
Sure. So Wayfair have been a fantastic partner for us over the last 6 or 7 years, and although we didn't start out on Wayfair, we went onto the marketplace after about 3 or 4 years. And the difference with Wayfair is that they are just furniture. So that is all they focus on. It's where they specialise. And the likes of Amazon, eBay are brilliant platforms, but they sell everything. Whereas Wayfair are very focused on furniture. And we built really good relationships there. And and grew quite a lot in the UK market with them. And because of that, they're a US-based company, but they have global ambitions. So they sell into Ireland, they sell into Germany. They have facilities in each of those to enable sellers like ourselves and wholesalers to sell into that marketplace without having to have a presence there. So almost like an Amazon FBA, they call Castlegate themselves. And the opportunity came about because we were doing a big bit of business with them in the UK market. And we've been pushing for a number of months to say, look, we really want to try the US market. We think our product offering is something a little bit unique. A lot of the US market's quite traditional. We're very modern, and we had a lot of glass and chrome metal, which is reasonably popular in the US market, but it's not their most popular category. So we pestered them for quite a while, and eventually they said, yeah, okay, fine, we give this a go. And they'd only allowed a handful of suppliers to do this throughout the whole of the UK. And what we were able to do is send our product directly from our suppliers into their facilities in the US. They then handle all of the fulfillment, all of the courier shipping. So in theory, all we needed to do was set up our listings, make sure that the products have been converted from centimeters to inches, that sort of thing. And we could just have free reign of the US marketplace. The beauty of that is that, as you'll be aware, the US is a lot bigger than the UK in every single way. And a lot of 3PLs we'd spoken to before were talking about how we'd have to forward position a lot of our stock in maybe 3 or 4 locations around the US. And that was a big risk for us. We didn't want to do that straight about. Whereas with Wayfair, they do that for us. And so we managed to run a bit of a pilot trial, found that actually there was a bit of a unique gap for us in that market, because although our product is maybe the most popular product in the US, there weren't many people selling it. And in terms of going back to your point as well around selection of products, we took the approach with this that we would go trial all of our best sellers in the UK in the US market. Some would work, some wouldn't work. And part of the reason for this is that we could carry across our reviews. So this was really key. So all of the reviews we generated in Wayfair UK, we were able to carry across into the US market. So we weren't necessarily starting from a brand new listing. And that meant with our best-selling products that had hundreds of great reviews, it gave us that leg up. So yeah, it was a big thing for us, and it's now growing hugely as we're ramping up the ranges and trialing lots of different product types as well.
Yeah, that makes that makes a lot of sense about focusing on one strategic partner that's even if you're not the most popular category in it, if you're the category leader within that, then the visibility you get in those journeys is really high. And I mean, talk about this from a resourcing and who manage it, because I've done some work with brands in the UK who want to sell more through other retailers, whether that's a marketplace like a Wayfair or it's through a strategic partner where they're putting their products onto there. And the bit that they often underestimate is the time and effort to nurture the relationships with the e-com equivalent, so that you have a direct in and you can plan marketing and you can use your marketing budget effectively rather than just using some generic selling tools and hoping. So I'd love to know, how do you do that? How do you have like e-com to e-com connections so that you are getting the most out of any marketing spend for like search and discovery?
We take a lot of time and effort to go and see people. And personally, I think COVID was great in terms of it allowed more people to work remotely and to be flexible. But I think a lot of businesses have lost touch with sort of the person-to-person in-face meetings. And we find that helps hugely. You can sit on meetings virtually, and that's brilliant. But actually going and seeing people and interacting and building those relationships are so key. So we take a lot of time to go and visit the likes of Wayfair, go and see them. And I guess if I was to sort of put an analogy on it a little bit, it's kind of like playing in a football team where you're initially on trial, not much is known about you. So when we went to Wayfair, they didn't really know who we were, and we had to prove ourselves to them. So we had to prove ourselves in terms of our products, the right quality, that we could adhere to their standards as well, but also that we be good people to deal with. And I guess in a football team, if you go on trial somewhere and your attitude's really poor and you don't care about anything other than yourself, and you're not doing the extra work behind the scenes, you're not going to get very far. But actually, if you buy into what they're trying to achieve and you support them in in aspects that you can, these opportunities come about because they recognise that they need suppliers that are on board that will help them in their journey. And so it's sort of a two-way relationship that we tend to find, but a lot of it's in person to help build those bonds.
And that's a really nice thing to highlight, actually, because this is the thing I spend quite a lot of time talking to people about is you have to put the effort in, because a retailer that's selling 200 brands or a marketplace has got everyone wanting to be top of search, top of category, product shelf, you name it. And actually, if all you're doing is asking and you're not building a relationship and understanding their strategy and how you can help them with better content or better product data, then it's not a two-way street, and that partnership doesn't build. And actually, they tune out more from brands who just want rather than what you're doing, which makes a lot of sense, which is build a strategic relationship.
Absolutely, and it's every aspect of it. And outside of obviously marketplaces, this is the same with all of our partners. Where it's a two-way relationship. How can you help us, and how can we help you? And with the likes of Wayfair, they have promotions that go on, and we often cut our margin, sometimes even make negative margin to get on board and support them with their promotions. But then they might help us. And a great examples with the US and all the uncertainty going on at the moment, they're offering free storage for 3 months in key lines. So that's really helped us because we're in a situation where our import costs have gone up. There's a lot of uncertainty, but they've actually taken that on to support suppliers. So it's a two-way relationship, and we find when you both lean in, you get the best results.
Yeah, excellent. And let's move on to like the tech and your operations, because you're not just in marketplaces, you've got your own e-commerce site, so you've got different channels to manage. Now, you work with Rupert Cross and the team at 5874. I've got a lot of time for. I think they've done a lot of really good projects, especially with like larger product catalogs and complex product catalogs. And you went on to BigCommerce. So I'd love to know what was the rationale for selecting BigCommerce, and how much was BigCommerce's integration capability in marketplaces a driving force in that decision?
Sure. So if I go back 3 years, we were in a position where we were on a Magento site. We had patched on top of patch on top of patch, and we were in a position where we just didn't have stability on our site. Things were constantly going wrong. We couldn't change things ourselves. It wasn't a good platform for us to work on when we were trying to build our brand. So although marketplaces have been very key in our journey, and they always will have their place for sure, and will always be a big part of our business, we realized that actually we want to grow our website because we can have a unique offering for customers on a service proposition. Actually, we want the option where a customer can come to us directly, or they can go to their favorite marketplace and buy there as well. And so when we started scoping out new websites, the key things we were looking for was reliability. So a website platform that in its core was very stable. So what I mean by that is that you're not having to apply a huge amount of custom work to get great out-the-box functionality. And we also wanted something with relatively low code where we could actually make a lot of changes ourselves. So the ability to change our own banners and do the small things like that without having to use developers or to customize things. And we also wanted a really key thing for us was longevity. So we wanted to move to a channel where we could stay on that website platform for years to come. And we didn't want to have a bit of a flash in the pan 2 years, then have to leave on, because it's a big undertaking and there's a lot of risk. So when we were scoping, those were the key things. We came across BigCommerce and felt they ticked all of the boxes for us. We felt that it offered that hybrid of reliability as well as functionality. And so it was probably about a year or so build. Then Rupert and the guys have taken it on, and we're really starting to see those gains now, which is incredibly exciting. And 58 have been awesome for us. But it's given us that stability that we haven't had for genuinely 4 or 5 years. I'm now a bit in this dreamland where previously I was expected to wake up every day and there'd be a big issue on the website. The checkout wasn't working or something had collapsed, whereas now it's not that. It's about looking further ahead for us on the developments and conversion rate optimization that we can do.
Yeah, and it's an interesting related question there. Do you find that, because typically I'd see, and I would never criticize any platform because they all serve different purposes and they fit different business models. But typically with Magento, is more money is spent on support and maintenance and keeping it going, and you spend less of your your budget on proactive development, roadmap and optimization, are you seeing now that you're freeing up more time to push forward the improvements then?
Exactly that. And these are improvements that are going to make the customer experience on site a million times better than it was before. And I guess with marketplaces, the thing that you can sometimes find frustrating is that you don't have the ability to carve out your own destiny there. You're guided by their parameters in essence. And a good example is we do next day delivery up until 8 p.m. in the evening. Now, most of our marketplaces can't support that. So we can't actually offer customers on those marketplaces the best possible service we want to. Likewise, if we wanted to bundle products together that would be suitable for customers or upsell, that sort of thing, we can't do that easily on a lot of marketplaces. So I think it's, for us, we're now seeing these big gains on our site compared to some of the marketplaces, because our hands aren't tied behind our back. We can make the changes that we know customers want.
And let's get on to the fun topic of inventory management, which is always a challenge when you're selling across multiple channels. And it's obviously critical to your direct to consumers, critical to marketplaces to have stock and be able and not have fragmented stock where an item has got like half of its variants out of stock. How do you handle this so that you don't like oversell or overcommit in one channel at detriment to another?
So fortunately, we have a really good tech setup where we have an iPaaS system as well as our ERP that actually fires out inventory on a live basis. So when a customer orders a product, that's allocated straight away against that marketplace. If we go back a few years, we didn't have integrations for all of our marketplaces, so we'd have to feed slightly lower inventory on a daily basis, whereas now it's all live. We very rarely see any overselling. I think the inventory management piece in general is really tough though for us, because you have 8 or 9 different marketplaces. You have different customers on all marketplaces. So we might be on sale in one marketplace for a few days and then off sale and in a sale on another one for a few days. And it's quite hard to decipher when you're looking at your monthly figures why that product's jumped up by 100% or why it's dropped off. So we have found it difficult in terms of forecasting, because we also have quite a lot of bundled products. So we have things like dining chairs where you can sell them individually, but also then they could be part of a dining set. So it does make it quite difficult, but we built out robust logic behind it, and it's helped us to achieve a 90% plus in stock rate throughout the year. So we're quite happy with it.
Yeah, I'd love to get a bit more into the inventory forecasting, because I had a couple of conversations recently with people saying, how do you do this? Because do you just use sales rates? Then do you factor in your ambient sales rate plus the fact you've got a big promotion coming up? But hang on a minute, now there's external factors influencing there. Oh, and there's competitors. And you suddenly realise that inventory forecasting, if you're trying to do it manually, at scale is a nightmare. So how much are you automating this and using like modern AI tools, for example, to put intelligence in, versus you've built your own algorithms or models to do it?
The answer to that is not enough. So we actually had a bit of a eureka moment in a sense, because last year we thought, right, to get this as accurate as we possibly can, myself, our head forecaster, and Monty are going to go through the forecast every 2 weeks, and we're going to manually adjust every single product. We're going to go and use our nuanced knowledge that we know, okay, it's been on a sale at X price, it's going to be on a sale for Y next month. All of this data through to our strategy, maybe on each channel, we said, right, we're going to do this manually. And it probably took us every 2 weeks about 6 hours each to go through meticulously on every single product. We didn't have any data over the first month or two to see how we performed. But we then looked at that look back window over the course of about 3 or 4 months and found that the products that were within 15% accuracy, so either 15% higher or lower than our forecast, it was only 20% of all of our manual figures hit that number. So it was kind of a bit of a eureka moment, but not a fun eureka moment, because as all of those hours you spent were kind of pointless because we weren't being anywhere near as accurate as we'd like. So we've scaled this back now and said, okay, we need to look at a tool that can help us with this, that can pull in our marketing data that maybe looks at a blended average, and we sort of appreciate that doing it individually isn't the best way, but using that logic around, we tend to look at a 3-month period. So we pick 3 stable months, and then the way that we manage this going forward is saying during promotional seasons, we will put a percentage uplift on our base figure. So rather than trying to guess that number and saying, okay, this one will go up by 100%, this one will go up by 5%, we just put a base percentage. So it's a really, really difficult thing to get right. But what we sort of realize is actually the more you can automate this, use intelligence like AI tools pulling in marketing data, the better for your results more generally.
And I know that you relatively recently invested in a state-of-the-art warehouse and distribution. So coming back to that organic fulfillment management piece, but what business challenges were you facing as a business as you're growing that prompted that investment? And I guess what capabilities have you now got that you previously didn't have?
We were bulging at the seams, to be honest with you. We had run out of space on our current site. We were having to use some third-party storage, which logistically also causes problems when you're trying to manage inventory. It was really inefficient. So the way that we'd grown is that we'd moved into an old chimney factory. It had 4 joined units, all with slightly different heights to each other, and all came with their own challenges as well, because where it was an old chimney factory, you still had the rail markings. It was incredibly dusty. The surface wasn't very flat. And as we grew, we managed to take on every single unit there. So we didn't have any space anymore. But also it really wasn't very efficient. So the way that we were picking and packing was limited. We were taking a long time to process orders because we'd have to go in between all of these different units. And also the final thing for us was location-wise. We knew that we wanted to be that service destination, and we were coming up against hurdles when it came to next day delivery, because we were based in a remote part of Wiltshire. So all of the hubs that we were trying to go to are quite a distance away from us, and we didn't have great transport routes. So I guess those 3 things really prompted us to look at our new warehouse, and it's been completely game-changing for us. It solved all of those. We wouldn't be able to do our 8 p.m. next day delivery cut-off point without having access to the M4 like we do at the moment. It means that you can just go straight up to the Midlands where most of our hubs are at 8 p.m. and still process orders on time. Not just orders, but any replacement parts or anything we need to do for the customer, we can serve much better. We've got space, and we built a multi-level mezzanine pick tower. So that means that we actually can bring in a lot more new products, and we won't run out of pickable space. The problem we used to have before was you could only pick products from the bottom stuff, and we didn't have anything above. So we'd ran out of pickable space at our old site as well. So it's great having that. And from an efficiency piece, it's been phenomenal. I mean, we used to struggle with every single member of the warehouse team, as well as myself and Monty in the warehouse, to get through 200 orders a day during peak. Now we can do up to about 1,000, and it's still not that much of an issue. And so it's, the efficiency gains have been pretty huge for us.
That's much. And how do you manage? Is this yours and you have your own team, or is it a 3PL that manages it for you? And who owns the tech bit from the warehousing point of view?
It's us and our team. So we use a system called Peoplebox, and it's managed by our own teams. And we're still building on this. Every month we're always coming up with new ways to try and get the best out of the system. But we run it ourselves because I think a lot of the time with third parties, they maybe don't have the same level of care as you do. And by being able to control it ourselves, we can decide if a vehicle breaks down, it's up to us on whether we want to go and get another vehicle in. We're not relying on other people. So it's always been done in-house ourselves.
Oh, that's interesting, because the control is amazing. It's quite challenging to get to that point of justifying investment into your own logistics rather than just outsourcing to 3PL. We operate our own warehouse, but we do use third parties like Parcelforce, DPD, DX, etc. So we use external third party couriers, but our operation we run ourselves. Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting to have that level of control. And what led you? How did you get to Peoplebox? I always find it interesting how people select their WMSs.
So we needed a system that could be quite customizable to us. The setup of our warehouse is different to a lot of other warehouses. And one thing that we had started in Mere, our old site, that we had to carry on was that we were picking orders on a part level. So very early on, myself and Monty had realised that the most efficient way of picking and packing orders wasn't to take a trolley and go and pack every single part of the dining set on one trolley first, then go and do it again. It was to actually go and just pick the individual parts separately based on their location. So what we used to do is we would take pallets and pump trucks around, and all of the tabletops that were nice and flat, we would go and pick one by one. And the way we used to do this was that we'd print out the full stack of labels and we'd write on the back, top, base, leg, and rip off each part. So we found that this was the most efficient way of doing things. But a lot of warehouse management systems don't allow you to do that. So a lot of systems will say, you have an order from Mrs. Jones here, you need to go and pick her full order before it can be dispatched. So we needed a system that we were able to customize as actually, we don't want that setup. We want a setup where we could go, okay, I'm going to go and pick Mrs. Jones' tabletop here. Someone else is going to go and pick her chairs. And in an hour's time, I'm going to go and pick the legs. But it doesn't matter, because when I get to the pack station, I can still print the consignment label for just that individual piece. So Peoplevox gave us great flexibility for that. And it's been super useful.
That's interesting. Yeah, so it's essentially zonal picking for efficiency for all the different elements across all the orders you need in a particular pick time. Okay, interesting. And how does that work from a consolidation once you get to the packing stations and you've got tops, legs, other components? How does that work spatially in order for those all to come together into the same shipment to get out to that customer?
Yeah, so I guess from our side, it doesn't actually matter how the product's stacked, because it will all go on the same trailer and it gets palletized separately. So you'll have collections for DPD, it could be DX, another one, and so we'll palletize everything based on the courier. And when it's sent to the central hub, that's when they're sorted. So we don't actually have to wait for those consignments. So we stack everything as efficiently as we can, and it's a bit like playing Jenga sometimes, where you're trying to stack the flat on top of these oddly shaped boxes. But because of that flexibility and because of the fact that our couriers can consolidate at the hubs, it means we don't have to worry about that ourselves.
Do you know, I hadn't even thought about that. That makes so much sense, because all the consignment labels are correct. It's going to the right address and it's in different packages. Then, I can see why that's a massive time saver for you to do the zonal piece.
Absolutely. It's sort of a weird process in a sense that we become exponentially more efficient the more we send out. So over a Black Friday period, the most recent Black Friday, we came in ready to store as many parcels as we could on Black Friday with the full team, and we were finished by 2 p.m. because the difference between us collecting 2 tabletops compared to 10 is so minimal, because you're only having to do that move on once. And so it's been a game changer for us to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've got another business I was speaking to where their big drive for change in WMS was to increase their rate of picking stuff to get to the packing benches, because they were having exactly the same. Somebody's picking an order and it's up that aisle, down that aisle, rather than, well, actually, if we do it zonally on different types of products based across the orders and we get all of the products there, then people can then pack, but we'll speed up the rate at which we get the product to the packing benches. Interesting. So I'm going to bring us back to, we got into the inventory management and the operation side. Let's bring it back to the original discussion we had around marketplaces. And I imagine anyone listening who's working in e-com and is doing some marketplace and maybe thinking about how they scale that this year. What is your advice to people wanting to drive marketplace growth? Like skills, resources, what do you need in-house to make this work?
So I guess what you need in-house to make this work are good, solid tech systems like a PIM system. So we use Pimbly for ours, but then also a feeding tool is quite useful. So something like a Feedonomics, a channel engine, something like that, I think are crucial, because what you don't want to be doing is uploading and making changes manually across all of these marketplaces. All of them have evolved to have integrations as well. So I think having a really solid tech stack that can support it is absolutely vital. We started off going onto marketplaces doing everything manually, and you just can't do that at scale, and it takes a lot of time. So using tools, as I say, like a PIM system, a channel integration tool, there's lots of them out there, and potentially also seeing what your ERP capabilities have in terms of plug and play. So we use Brightpile, and it has integrations to a number of marketplaces straight off the bat, so you don't actually have to do that much additional work. I guess then in terms of personnel, it's kind of similar to what you would have in a marketing team for a website or an e-com team. You can't do quite as much, but you need people that can look at the opportunities that you have. You can see what promotions you can get involved in. With a lot of the marketplaces, you get great data around visits on your store and also to your products. So, and there's ads as well that you can run. So they're kind of like mini versions of your website, but you don't obviously have quite as much control. But you still need the same eye around opportunities there, because there's lots of them. A lot of people on marketplaces don't take those opportunities. So it's something we spend a lot of time doing, working with the marketplaces, but also testing things ourselves to see what works and doesn't work.
Yeah, the use of data, having somebody who actually understands the data points and how you can use them to get insight to make better decisions, that's a really nice thing to pull out, actually. So a lot of times the focus is on getting things on and manage it and looking at sales, but not necessarily looking at the everything that's happening before the sale to know which areas you should push on. And in terms of your own personal future direction for the business, I think you said about 9 marketplaces. How do you see your marketplace strategy evolving like this year and beyond? Is it consolidation in existing ones? Are you looking to expand into new territories or new marketplaces?
Yeah, so the marketplaces are brilliant for expansion into other countries. So in the US market, we've gone onto Amazon and Walmart now, and we're going to be using them alongside Wayfair to expand initially in the US. So we see that as a strategy we want to take further forward. In the UK, we're very much going to be consolidating. So the problem you can sometimes have, and I think you mentioned at the start of the podcast, is everyone wants to do a marketplace now. And what you don't want to do is spread yourself and your teams a bit too thin. 9 is probably right at the maximum of what we can deal with at the moment. So we're being a lot more selective in terms of our marketplaces, and joining marketplaces that I guess can align with our company goals and our aims, and potentially scaling back some marketplaces if they don't align with that, because they will work in slightly different ways. And if you're trying to update price points manually on 10 different sites, it just doesn't work. So I would say it's consolidation in the UK for us, and trying to get the best out of the relationships we do have with marketplaces. And the likes of the US market, it's looking at new ones we can go on to that can help us get out to more people.
Excellent. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. I've really enjoyed this. I'm loving this success story. I hope you guys continue to have stellar growth as well. Look forward to seeing what comes next, but appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Cheers. And everyone listening, I hope you've enjoyed it. Do reach out, let us know what you think, and any other questions you've got about marketplace, commerce, and the topics brought up in this podcast, do let me or Paul know. Thanks very much, everyone. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.